Hey, howdy, and welcome, kids. It is time once again for Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. This is me, Dr. Michael Lennox, coming at you on August 7th for the week of August 7th through 13th. Gentler month, kids. Definitely easier than July was. But it's going to be quite a week ahead for the Venus retrograde cycle. It's really all I'm going to be talking about in today's episode is sort of three big moments in the Venus retrograde cycle that play out this week. So it's definitely not the most intense month of the year by far, certainly compared to what July felt like. But it is juicy in the emotional, relational area with an emphasis on this week sort of providing a lot of power, punch, shadow, and, emotional, relational stuff that might knock some of you on your ass. But first, let's answer this week's question. First, I want to say to the woman out there who wrote me an email asking a question about the Saturn return experience that she's having, I lost the email. I can't find it.
No.
So if you hear this, honey, write me again and I'll answer that question in the next podcast. Although I think I did answer a question about exactly what you're asking in recent months, but I'm happy to answer it again. Meanwhile, I got a question from Carrie that's about Venus, so it's sort of perfect timing since we've got a week where Venus retrograde transits are the big energy of the week. So Carrie writes, "Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for sharing astrology with us every week. Your answers to questions are always so full and deeply profound." Love that. Thank you, Carrie. I have, however, become confused about the role of Venus. I was under the impression that the moon represents our emotional body, and Venus was more about how we give and receive love, etc. Can you please clarify the two? Much appreciated. Warmly,
Ooh,
Carrie.
great question. I love this.
Great question. Great timing
Absolutely.
for a great question. And I totally understand why there's confusion about this, and I will clear that up so efficiently. Here we go. We live in a four-body system. That's one sort of way of organizing the notion that we have a physical body that we act and do with. We have a mental body through which we consider and perceive. We have a spiritual body that sort of encapsulates the whole thing. And we have this emotional body. And in the lens of astrology, the physical body is Mars, the mental body is Mercury, the emotional body is Venus, and the spiritual body would be the dance that's never ending between the sun and the moon. So this I stand by. Venus is our reflection of the emotional body, and we process our feelings through our Venus consciousness. And so even the idea of giving and receiving of love as a Venusian thing, even that has to do with the emotional body because we feel love as a kind of an emotion in the body, even though they say love is in action, blah, blah, blah. We feel love in our feeling sensibility. So Venus is, in fact, the planet of giving and receiving love. But regulating emotions is absolutely a Venus thing. Here's where the moon comes in. The moon is the arbiter of our unconscious. Where do most of our big feelings
absolutely.
emanate from? The unconscious, right? So somebody says something to us that triggers deep emotional feeling. And we have this big emotional reaction. Well, I'm here to say that the emotional processing in the body is a Venus thing, but the trigger that causes the feeling to come at a particular time or not is unconscious material at play. And therefore, the moon will reflect an emotional aspect of our humanity, but from the place of the unconscious expressing ourselves from below the surface in ways that we sometimes will feel as great emotionality. So I leave you, Carrie, with this. Venus rules the emotional body, beginning, middle, and end of that story. But the unconscious and the cycles and the way we move through things in a mysterious way that periodically will pop into our conscious awareness, that's the moon. And through unconscious processing, we often feel deep feelings. And in this way, really, you can think of the moon and Venus as working together to complete how we experience our emotional body and the unconscious material that causes our emotional body to sometimes go into overdrive. Okay, so it is a quiet-ish month, and in some ways we're in, I don't know if this is a quiet week exactly, but we had a full moon last week and we have a new moon next week, and so we don't have a lunation. Mercury is in his shadow, but he's not like tripping us up too much yet because he doesn't turn around till the third week in August. And it's just a general, quiet, stable time, except for Venus. She is so active this week. And I'm going to break these down into different little segments, but the gestalt of it is she's conjuncting Black Moon Lilith early in the week, so that means deep shadow is triggered in your emotional and relational experience. There's a square from Venus to Uranus, which means sudden, unexpected shifts and changes, get knocked on our asses a little bit from emotions and relational, material. There's a profound moment of the conjunction between the Sun and Venus as we get to the weekend, which will bring an enormous amount of clarity about the process itself because it's largely an unconscious process with Venus moving backwards. So let's break each one of these little segments down. So let's just do a little quick teaching on what Black Moon Lilith is so that we can better understand what it means to have Venus conjuncting her 3 times during this retrograde. So Black Moon is related to the moon's orbit, but it's not something that happens outside of the moon's orbit. It happens inside of the moon's orbit, in between the Earth and the moon. Now, the moon and the Earth pull on each other. There's like a wobble. The moon is further away and closer to in a manner that's measurable. And this wobble, this distance between the Earth and the moon that's always shifting, has a mean. It has an average that can be calculated. And that average points to Black Moon Lilith. And it moves. It moves through a sign over the period of 9 months. I think that's very interesting that that's our gestational period. Because it relates to the moon itself, it's about unconscious material. But because it's not about the outer space beyond the moon, but inside, it's the unconscious material that's right below our feet, that's bubbling out of the surface below and that we are tripping on, right? Where we slip of the tongue or things we didn't expect, or we make a mistake that turns out to be a deep lesson. That's the unconscious material bubbling up out of the Black Moon sort of Lilith sewer. I use sewer because it's like the manhole cover where things are going to bubble up. There's a lot of juicy sexuality consciousness in the Lilith portion of Black Moon. Now, I don't know why Western astrologers added Lilith to the Black Moon sensibility, but that happened. And so because Lilith is considered the powerful feminine energy, equal instead to Adam, created by, God in the same, form. They both were made of flesh. There's no ribs involved. So there's no subservient feminine energy. That's a patriarchal consideration. A much more pagan and earthy expression is this Lilith power. So Black Moon Lilith, when there's a transit that connects to Black Moon Lilith, we experience juicy shadow material that is typically too far below the surface of the consciousness to work with in our sort of choice. In other words, Black Moon Lilith says we don't have a choice. The unconscious chooses and is going to, throw something up at us. But with a retrograde cycle of Venus coming together with Black Moon, which happened the first time on June 28th, might have opened up the basement below for some juicy material around love, intimacy, how sex and intimacy connects. We talk a lot about love and intimacy in a Venus retrograde. We don't talk about sex, but a lot of love includes sex.
True.
And Black Moon Lilith is the juicy sexual energy that most people are afraid of. And so we push it away because we're afraid of the power of our sexual drives. But when we incorporate and integrate those drives into our conscious understanding, we have richer relationships, better sex, and a more comfortable journey through shadow material sort of rising up. So look back to June 28th. Consider what's happening right now. This is a today thing, Monday, August 7th. And it will not happen a third time. Black Moon is moving forward. She will enter Virgo in about a week after her 9 months in Leo. So we have birthed something that is about a more fiery, extroverted, leadership, creative, those are Leo qualities, relationship to shadow that Venus is going to help us incorporate. So again, late June, around the 28th, to things that are coming up this past weekend today and even tomorrow, Tuesday, might have some shadow material that you need to be courageous enough to look at. And if anything did come up in late June, then you definitely need to spend some time just marinating in the shadowy, emotional, unconscious, sexy muck that might be coming up now. Then smack dab in the middle of the week is the big knocking you on your ass transit of Venus's retrograde cycle. Venus in a square with Uranus means A, things can change, and they change on a dime if they do. Uranus is the agent of change that happens suddenly and fast. Pluto is the agent of change that's slow and transformational. So when Venus is doing the squaring with Uranus, then relational issues are likely to lead to sudden and unexpected shifts. Now, I can just hear people saying, well, is that good or bad?
Read my mind.
Of course, my first impulse. Yeah, I know. That's what you're thinking, right? So, and I always want to slap people when they ask that question first.
I know better, but it just comes
foremost.
up,
So let's just say this. Both are possible because Uranus does not distinguish between what we would call positive and negative experiences. The drive is simply to become more aware, to wake up to something that had not been woken up to before. So in the purity of what's possible, it's just as possible to explode into a sense of love that you didn't think was possible. This happens more in the movies than in real life, but it can happen that somebody looks across the room and says, oh, wow, it's been you all the time. That happens. I don't think it happens as much in real life as it does in the movies, but change is what's guaranteed in this transit, and change at a fast and sudden level. Now, of course, we're in the backward motion, which means we got prepped for this particular transit right as July was beginning. July 2nd was the date that Venus and Uranus squared the first time. So you can look back to the beginning of July, just see what was going on in your heart in the beginning of July. And chances are, if something juicy happened or was suddenly added or suddenly taken away from your experience, you're going to be reviewing it this week, specifically Wednesday as the peak. That means Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are the juicy days for that. And if really, truly, you did get knocked on your ass in a big way in early July, this is then a really important week. In fact, I kind of like the fact that it's quiet outside of Venus retrograde stuff, so that this whole podcast is really just listen, kids, for what your heart is going through, because this is the deepest part of the cycle. Not deepest, that's not really the right word. This is, well, no, I'll go with that. Deepest, juiciest, and most potentially impactful for changing things in your relational dynamic. So look for things in the middle of the week that knock you on your ass, and hopefully, if they do, if that happens, you can draw a line back to early July and make some sense out of what's coming up now, because there's a very good chance that thematically there's a relationship to challenges this week with stuff that was coming up back then. Now, this is a triple transit, which means we're not done. If something that you're trying to keep together falls apart this week, you got one more sort of pass at the end of September when Venus is in her wrap-up and hits this square for the third and final time. So what goes on now may not be the final version of the story that you're moving through, but there's a very good chance that the story includes sudden and unexpected changes. And understand that this week is all about that. One of the most fortunate elements of Venus going retrograde in Leo is the fact that we are in the Leo mansion. So our conscious awareness is already in alignment with all of the sort of warm, gregarious, extroverted, joyful possibilities that love has for us. We're already aligned to be thinking about those qualities with the sun in that sign. I mean, like, one of the things I love about this retrograde for people who struggle with undeserving and unworthiness is there ain't no unworthiness in the Leo mansion. In fact, if anything, there's the shadow of too much worthiness and arrogance and grandiosity in that mansion. But when it comes to love, Venus is on fire in Leo. I mean, it's a neutral sign. It's not like she's exalted there. She's not happier there than she is in certain signs like Pisces and, Libra and Taurus, where she's in rulership. But there's certainly the quality of I deserve, because Leo invented deserving. The sun is never doubting itself. Yeah. The sun is never going, oh, am I shining today? I don't. We doubt the sun's never-ending shininess because we believe the clouds, right? So, Venus in Leo in her retrograde is taking us below the surface to examine issues of giving and receiving of love, with the promise that as we work out the shit that comes up in our hearts during this cycle, the promise to be delivered is more warm, gregarious, outgoing love in the heart. But she's retrograde, which means she's operating somewhere we can't see clearly or feel clearly or know what's actually going on. As a psychologist, I love using the term unconscious to refer to where personal planets are hanging out when they're moving backwards. Because we think of, forward motion as our conscious awareness, and then the backward motion would be places that are opposite conscious awareness, therefore the unconscious. We are in this unconscious process that we can, certainly while Venus is backwards, we can only really understand what's happening when something occurs and we can interpret it. You have a conversation with somebody, it reveals some more, and then suddenly you know more on a Tuesday than you did on a Monday. That's because something was revealed. So when the sun and a retrograding personal planet come together by conjunction, it's a boon to us because now our conscious awareness is directly in touch with the planet that's below the surface. This happens at the exact midpoint of every Mercury retrograde cycle. So if you've been following astrology, you have heard me or any other astrologer talk about this for years because 3 times a year, Mercury goes retrograde, and smack dab in the middle, there's this moment. I say, hey, guys, look for the aha moment. Mercury's a trickster. He's in the below. The sun is our conscious awareness. When they're hanging out together, we can see what he's up to below the surface, so we want to look for the information that's available at that moment. That is happening with Venus and the sun this Sunday. So it's not a triple transit. The sun will plow on forward as Venus is moving backwards. It's simply the benefit of having Venus in Leo while the sun is in Leo. And so since I think people out there who are learning more about how astrology works, you'll really get what's powerful about Mercury and the sun coming together. It directly translates to this experience where our conscious awareness is going to have the benefit of being able to be aware of material that is typically below the surface, that on Friday and Tuesday will be gone, but Saturday, Sunday, and Monday will be available. Don't miss that opportunity. Now, there's a little more than just that on Sunday. But I wanted to make sure that before I talked about Friday and Saturday's energy that leads to Sunday, I wanted to make sure that you guys really got the value and the importance of what's available to us on Sunday, so that as I describe what's happening in the world of Chiron on Friday and Saturday, you can put it all together and understand what the end game is as the sun and Venus come together. We're being prepped for a kind of profound healing opportunity where we get to make new choices based on what we're learning in our sort of emotional unconscious processing. I'm going to start with what happens on Saturday because it involves the sun. Just as the sun is receiving Sunday's conjunction from Venus, there's also a trine between the sun and Chiron. So just that alone, sun and Chiron in a trine, which is going to happen twice every year, that's going to be a moment where our conscious awareness is wide open with regard to knowing, being aware of, what our healing process is. Now, healing is confounding because it's an unconscious process. We get scared. It's lots of feelings involved, and we sort of move in and out of our willingness to be in the sort of mucky processing. When the sun and Chiron are in a trine, that's not happening. We're good with it. We're aware. We can benefit from that awareness. Now, if I back up one more day to Friday, now we have the planet Mars hitting Chiron in the inconjunct, the great eliminator angle. So here we have the planet that rules our physical body, our choices, decision-making, goals, and aspirations, right? We choose with Mars, but the quality of our choices connects to Venus, right? We may do the choosing with our Mars consciousness, but what we feel deserving of or not is a Venus thing. So to have in the middle of a juicy week of Venus's retrograde cycle, at a moment where we're going to be completely consciously aware, to the extent that that's possible, of the wound healing that's going on below the surface with Venus down there, the planet of our embodiment is saying to our Chiron experience, we can make different choices. Some of you will be, in fact, making different choices this weekend based on stuff that you've been going through the last month and a half as Venus has been engaged in this process. Additionally, the conscious awareness possibility for this coming weekend is so strong that even if you're not ready to make the new healthier choice, you will be aware of what that is at a level that will be, kind of like undeniable.
I like that. Strong messaging.
Right. Strong messaging, clear new fork in the road, like go that way, not that way. And if you hear this information and you move through next weekend and you feel like you're still in like learning mode and like training wheels on, that's okay, because we're not at the end of Venus's processing with us. We're in the juicy moment where we're like wrestling with our own unworthinesses and, love challenges. But yes, we will know, we will see clearly, and we will be potentially delivered marching orders about what direction to head in. Even if we're not quite ready to step in that direction, we will know. So keep your courage open wide, your willingness and curiosity engaged, and have at it.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. This week we have a call-in dreamer. Mary Alice is calling in from Ohio. Hey, what you dreaming?
Hello, thanks for having me. So I'll just jump right into it. All right, it's me and my son. We're walking into our house. As soon as we walk into the house, which we're walking in from the front door, my son goes straight up to his room. Not long after, a random employee from a company knocked on my door and is telling me that they would pay my rent for a few months. As she
They
walked,
will pay your rent?
yes, for a few months.
Okay.
Right. As she walked,
Yeah, that's a lovely dream. They will.
okay.
Okay, great.
So as she's walking into the house, I start seeing a few fat snakes on the ground, and they start to go up the walls. And I do notice
Huh.
that there was a reddish orange snake that was on the wall as well. So right after, another person from a random company comes knocking on my door, is offering to give me $300 a month. So when she comes in, the snakes tripled. I was terrified. I kept calling for my son, but he couldn't hear me and didn't come down the stairs until the last minute. So as he's coming down the stairs, we run out of the house, and I look back and I see one of the snakes had a set of extremely skinny legs, and it was trying to bite my dog. And
Hump your dog?
no, bite my dog.
Oh, bite your dog. I'm
Yeah,
sorry. Liz, you know
yeah.
where mine went. Sorry.
No, you're
So
fine. You're fine.
skinny with legs tried to bite your dog. Okay.
Yep. And I woke up right after. I could feel myself trembling in the dream as I'm dreaming it. And then I just woke
Okay.
up and It was so weird.
What was the emotional sort of state you were in as you woke up? Like, how did the dream leave you? If you were
Um,
trembling in the dream and as you're coming out of the dream, yeah, how did you feel when you woke up?
well, when I initially woke up, I still was kind of trembling, and then it subsided.
Okay.
Yeah, it subsided, and then I was just like, "Whoa, what was that about?" Because in my waking life, I am terrified of snakes. A
Ooh,
couple
even
months
better.
ago, we had a run in with a snake. A snake got into our apartment. We caught it and let it go, and then we've since moved from that apartment. So I don't know if there's any correlation, but I'll give you that.
Well, there's always correlation to things that are triggering in our lifetime. In our waking life, will often show up in our dreams, but we still go to the symbolic meaning of snake is change and transformation. Whether you are someone who dislikes snakes or someone who likes them or thinks they're interesting, right? So now, because this is fabulous that you're terrified of snakes, because I think this is a dream that's very much about your fears of financial insecurity. So that leads me to ask you just a question about that. Outside of the dreams content, just as a person in your life, how would you describe your own relationship to the fears that you have about your financial sovereignty and safety?
Well, it is a little rocky right now. I've had to take care of my mom for the past couple months, and that's kind of depleted my savings and my
Got
ways
it.
of getting funds. So I can understand that.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, because to me, it's a very sort of simple dream because it starts with you and your son. Would that be fair to say that that's sort of your family? Is there a baby
Yeah.
daddy connected?
Well, there is, but not within the household. We're separate.
Got it. Got it. Got it. So that makes sense to me because the dream then is more about your very immediate experience
Mm,
that obviously is never disconnected from you being a mom to your son, right?
right.
Walking into the house would be I'm in consideration of who I am at this moment because house dreams are always reflective of some sense of self. And this is actually your literal home that you're living in, right?
Right.
Like in the dream, you recognized it as that. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So in symbolic land, we go to this is your current sense of self. Now, what's interesting when you go into the front door, your son leaves the space. That tells me we're not in the consideration of your son's consciousness about finances or safety or security. And it's not even the conflict that I think the dream is reflecting isn't about you as a mother or your interaction with your child, because when you get inside, he goes to his own space. That tells me he's good. He's got his space. The dream and the scary shit is for you.
Mm,
And it starts with this idea of unexpected income. Do you trust that life brings unexpected income now and then?
I definitely do. Yeah.
In some New Thought spiritual centers, that particular idea is sort of lifted up as a kind of a way to get past poverty consciousness, because poverty consciousness would say, I have nothing, I don't have enough, I never have, I never will, and we're in trouble.
Right. Right.
Right? But the unexpected income posture says, I live in the world of possibility that someone could knock on my door and say, I will pay rent.
Hmm.
Were there anything in the dream content about that first employee who knocked on the door? Did you know them? Was there so it's
Yeah.
just a
No, they were both
random,
random. Right.
both men?
No, they were women.
They were women. Okay. So
Hmm.
they're coming at you from your feminine consciousness. I would say, I mean, this might even be me being an almost 60-year-old man from another era where masculine would be about action you would need to take,
Hmm.
but feminine would be about a way you need to be in receiving, right? The
Hmm.
message is coming from women knocking on the door. So the first one who comes and says, I will pay your rent, Symbolically, it's like be open to the possibility that you will always get your basic needs met. Rent is basic needs, right? I'm not talking about life rent. I'm talking about dream rent would be like, am I housable? Am I safe? And so an unexpected income sensibility is knocking on your door saying it can come from nowhere. Then there's even yet a second theme of that, where then there's the $300, sort of the second offer. But they're both come from a similar experience of a feminine principle energy knocking on your door saying unexpected income is possible. So then the snake piece tells me we're also in consideration of like what needs to change and transform for you to be in sort of a better sort of flow in your finances. Both the fears that you have that you won't have enough that just give you a shitty day on a Wednesday when you're thinking about like, I don't have enough, right? You haven't changed your income situation. You've just given yourself a bad day thinking about the fears that you have.
Right.
So the snake piece, the fact that the snakes are all over the walls are like things are changing. Now, you just moved. There might be fears of change that the snakes are also representing in the dream, since they're all over the walls. They're sort of all over the foundation of your home.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that's another expression of changes that your soulful self is asking you to sort of dive into that will give you a little bit more freedom from the fears of financial insecurity. What's interesting to me about like why I sort of go there with that there's fears that you're being asked to process is because the snake that gets legs on it is like a fearful change that's like rising up, becoming something that's dangerous, and it bites your dog, which is symbolic of love that's unconditional being hampered. Right? Our dogs and our cats are symbols of joy, especially with dogs, joy, ease. Like your dog's not worried about rent.
Right.
Right? But that part of you, the symbol, the symbol of the dog in the dream is your access to feeling easy, breezy, rub my belly and all is well. I trust that you've got food for me. That dog consciousness is your access to feeling free. And even that's being bitten by the fears around change.
I can definitely see that. Yes. You go ahead.
No, I at the moment, I don't know that I have anything else to add.
I was just gonna say I'm in the process of changing careers.
Oh,
And
honey.
So the fact that you
There
say
you
that,
go.
oh, it makes sense, right?
Right. So first of all, I love that you gave us that distinction, because
Okay.
then I don't feel like I've been hitting you over the head around this dream as images of change all over the place, because I was starting to feel a little bit like, oh God, am I overemphasizing this? But if you're trying to change careers, honey,
Yeah.
career and money and income are all related.
All
Change
of it.
is terrifying. But what's beautiful, Mary Alice, is the dream tells me the changes are already taking place.
They are indeed.
And that the only thing that inhibits our ability to feel more graceful about that is the fears of financial insecurity.
Exactly.
All right, baby.
That makes so much sense. Thank you.
Well, we wish you, and everyone listening wishes you grace, ease, and power in these changes that you are looking to make in your career. And as I always like to say, have at it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the Daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.